My presentation is about supercharging keyword research and search intent classification in Google Data Studio, and specifically it's going to talk about the international aspect of keyword research and also how to use it in content creation. A couple of words about me. I am someone that loves doing data studio dashboards and incorporate them in everything that I do. And obviously keyword research and content strategy is something that I do in my role. And that's basically everything you need to know for this talk specifically. So I know I'm not the only one that loves classifying search intent, because if Semrush is doing it in their tool, then there's definitely a lot of interest for it. I don't know if people use Semrush or not, but they recently released a feature that categorizes keywords based on the 4 types of intent that they've deemed most important. I'm sure that you have seen this, because at the time of the release of this feature, my personal LinkedIn and Twitter were just flooding in with different messages and how everyone loves this and it's perfect. So today I want to talk about obviously search intent, but I also want to suggest an additional approach in classifying search intent that uses Data Studio and alternatively Google Sheets as well, just in case you don't have access to Semrush. So we are going to talk about what is search intent, why is it important, how can you classify for search intent yourself in Google Sheets and Data Studio. We're going to talk about how to adapt your strategy in international campaigns, and also how to adapt it for different industries as well, and how to use search intent in content creation and in strategy too. So let's start. Before we begin, we have to talk about the fundamentals, which is what is search intent and why are we talking about this today. So essentially, according to academic studies, when people submit queries, and it doesn't matter whether the queries are submitted to a search engine or back in the days when people were going into a library and they were just submitting queries there, most of them can be classified into a single category of intent, which means that there are these 25% of queries that are a little bit more complex, and they typically fall into more than one category. So what are the 3 categories that are the main types of search intent? First, we have informational search intent. These are no queries. They indicate an intent or a desire of the user to locate a particular information snippet or a place on the web that can satisfy an informational need that they are struggling with. So it's very easy to spot these type of intent, because the keywords that people usually use can indicate things like the question, for instance, what, why, how, or they can also indicate maybe the type of resource that they're looking for. Maybe they're looking for a blog, a guide, and things like that. The second type is the navigational search intent, which demonstrates a desire of the user to locate information or pages that are related to a particular organization that they are already brand aware of. And this can come in many different forms. They might have encountered this brand via other channels. They might have encountered it offline, but they're already aware of the brand. They are already aware of where they want to go, and they're just navigating to that particular place. And then there's also transactional search intent as a main category. And this particularly shows the user's desire to perform a web-mediated transaction or to obtain something other than information with their search. But as you've seen at the start when I showed the Semrush snippet, we know that there's more categories than that. And obviously, those 25% generate new clusters. So if you have maybe search intent that does not align into one of these 3 main categories, but there's enough people having a particular pattern of intent that combines maybe to a certain degree either 2 or all 3 of these intents, then what happens is we get new categories of search intent, which are a little bit more niche. So there's 2 more that are very widely known, but there might be more in the future once we are more familiar with intent and once we research it more. So the two that I'm talking about is commercial search intent, which is a combination of all three intents. The user demonstrates a desire to perform a comparative evaluation of organizations that they're already brand aware of. And within this search process, they might also be introduced to other organizations in the same niche that can satisfy a transactional intent that they have. So here we have a little bit of informational intent, we have a little bit of transactional intent, but we also have navigational intent because they're already aware of the different players in the niche. And we also have localized search intent, which brings in a new component in this mix of intent, which is the geographical component. Here, the user has a little bit of an informational need, but they also have a very strong transactional intent, and they want to understand where they can physically closely to them go and fulfill this transaction. So they don't want to typically do a web-mediated transaction. They want to find the information that will help them do a physical transaction. So why is this important? Like, why are we even talking about search intent? Well, first of all, search intent corresponds with the conversion funnel. So the higher the likelihood of conversion, the more niche the intent. So if you're talking about informational search intent, we know that there is a large pool of queries that want to find information, and people that want to search for information on the web, but they might not have any alternative needs. They might not want to fulfill a transaction, or they might not be there yet in their journey. So a big chunk of people with that intent, but a low likelihood of conversion. And it's exactly the opposite, the lower down the funnel that you go. And the second thing is actually something that Google says in their guidelines for evaluating search queries, and that is that understanding the query is the first step in evaluating the task. So for us SEOs, it's very important to understand how people search and what their queries actually represent in terms of their needs, in order for us to build pages and build websites that actually satisfy these needs. And so essentially what I'm saying is that if you understand intent, you will be able to write pages and structure your website in a way that actually fulfills that intent. So let's talk about how you actually do that. How do you classify keywords based on search intent and set yourself up for success when you are building your pages? The first approach here is via Google Data Studio. I've built a dashboard. You'll be able to access it through a link in the slides. So let's talk about the different characteristics here of this approach. It's easy to set up. Essentially, all you need to do is to insert a Google Sheet with all of the keywords that you have perhaps search for in different locations. So for instance, if you are using different tools in order to do your keyword research, if you're using maybe Semrush, Ahrefs, Keywords Everywhere, Google's keywords tool, you just build a Google Sheet with all of your keywords and you insert it here, and the dashboard does the rest. It's quite clear to communicate with your stakeholders, regardless whether it is more senior stakeholders or whether it is an outsourced freelancer or something like that, content creators, for instance. And it's free to use, but free-ish, I would say, because it really does depend where you are getting your keywords data from. So that's quite an important justification to make. It also enables you to input multiple data sources. It's interactive and it's quite visual, as you can see. There is no additional research needed. So the research that you need in order to use this dashboard is that you need to know how the industry operates, and you need to know how people search within this industry. And another kind of limitation that I found with this approach is that it doesn't show all opportunities. So for instance, the filters that are used, they only show you what falls within those filters. So you definitely need to spend a little bit more time to understand search patterns within the niche, and then you can build more comprehensive filters, but we're going to talk about that in a moment. The second approach is to use formulas in Google Sheets. Now that's a little bit harder to set up because it involves a little bit more technical knowledge, maybe a little bit sheet formulas or regex, which is something that we all do, so it shouldn't be that challenging. It's quite it's a little bit more challenging to communicate, especially with people that are not used to perhaps looking at spreadsheets all the time. So if you're communicating with content creators or web designers, it might be a little bit harder to get these concepts to them with a Sheets template. But it's free to use, again, with the caveat that you might pay to get the data for your keywords. It enables you to include multiple data sources. And the good thing about it as well is that it also shows all opportunities that essentially you have, because you have this classification dashboard on one side, and you can quickly switch to another tab and actually see whether perhaps your filters are not catching some important keywords that you want to display in them. And then the third approach is using a paid tool such as Semrush, and it's quite easy to set up. It's clear to communicate. It's very interactive. There's not really any additional research needed here, so you just search for your keywords and you get information about the intent, and it shows all of the opportunities. So essentially, if you put your trust in that tool, then you would imagine that the research here is a lot more extensive, and it's not just based on a simple match function. The caveat is that, first of all, you cannot use this data in conjunction with other data sources that you have, and it's also not free, which is a big challenge for many consultants that perhaps work on a freelance basis or work with smaller clients and have a smaller budget. And then my favorite method, which I see a lot of people doing, is just use some sorcery or completely ignore search intent altogether. It's quite easy to set up. You don't need to give explanation to anybody how you're doing it. It's completely free, and there's no additional research needed, because essentially you're just trusting yourself that you know better. But I would definitely avoid this method. Definitely, you cannot actually build a good strategy if you are not using data to actually inform your decision making, and that is something that Google has confirmed as well. So if they're doing it, you should also think about doing it too. So just a summary of all the methods here. Again, depending on your budget, you might choose a method that you have a little bit more control of, that you can use different data sources. So that will be the Data Studio or the Google Sheets, or you might just go with the paid tool if you have the possibility to do that. So let's get to the nitty-gritty. How do you actually do the classification in Data Studio or in Google Sheets? Well, first, the most important thing that you need to know is that you're going to be using filters based on specific keywords that will indicate the category of search intent. So for instance, informational search intent is going to be identified if the long tail keyword contains a specific keyword that will indicate the desire of the user to locate a particular information snippet, or maybe to locate a particular resource. Commercial intent is going to be identified by different keywords such as price, cheap, expensive, recommendation, basically anything that indicates a form of comparative evaluation. Then you have transactional search intent, which is going to be identified with different keywords like best, top, review, cheap, and comparison. So let's just pause a little bit here, and I just want to stress out that the example that I have given in the previous slide and also at the conference, this is a very basic example, and of course the expectation here is that the more you do keyword research for your particular niche and the more you understand the market, these particular filters, they're going to grow, because you can include many different things in those filters, different keywords that will indicate a particular intent category. So the more you understand the market, the more comprehensive your report is going to become. And of course, you are going to have full control whether how you classify these keywords, which means that it's going to be a lot easier for you to communicate with your stakeholder exactly how you have done it. And in Data Studio, the way that you would filter is either via custom filters, where you would insert all of your keywords using a regex, or you would create a custom dimension using a case-when formula. And either of these approaches is fine. In Sheets, you would use a formula, again, based on a regex match function, and you will be able to see all of the dimensions in the one page. So since the last time I introduced this topic and this method, I was approached by Constantine, who actually shared a very cool way, an alternative way to what I described, in how he classifies keywords for the SaaS industry. And I thought this was very, very valuable and worthy of sharing with the audience today, because again, it uses a 2 intent categories instead of 4, only using informational and commercial, but it goes a little bit deeper into those 2 categories. And it also introduces an additional category of intent, which indicates the action that the user wants to complete. So are they trying to build awareness? Are they want to do a particular action related to the site or even the topic that they're researching, or they're trying to help themselves make a decision in relation to the topic. So you can see that this is quite comprehensive, but it's a very good reflection of the SaaS industry search patterns. So I thought it was very a cool approach to share with you guys. And this got me thinking, of course, after a couple of conversations with him, why not also include indicators of the resource type? So for instance, if you have keywords like webinar, guide, report, this can signal informational intent. But if you have keywords like white paper, case study, review, analysis, this signals commercial intent. And to take this a step further, why not also include adjectives that indicate the content thoroughness? So for instance, keywords like beginner, starter, fundamental, this indicates low intent. So you would imagine that this type of user is not going to be as interested in the topic as someone that, for instance, has keywords like advanced, expert, ultimate, end-to-end. So these type of keywords are going to indicate a very high intent, a very high interest in this topic. So if you have maybe a blog, these will be the keywords that you are typically already using in order to kind of reach the people that are very, very interested in the topic. And maybe if your CTA matches their intent, you have a better likelihood at keeping them engaged with your brand. So just a very quick plug here. If you have a bright idea, please feel free to approach me and share it with me, because currently I want to know how people are actually using a search intent classification on their own, with the idea of actually getting a panel of different experts that can help me build a Sheets tool or even a more comprehensive version of this dashboard, where you can actually see how the different search patterns change for e-commerce or the service industry or the SaaS industry and any other industry that you think is very unique in terms of search patterns. So feel free to approach me after the talk and share your insights with me on this. And another important thing is that you also have to prioritize if you are applying these filters in order to assess how well you are targeting intent with your own page. So for instance, you can use the filters that you've created in order to see whether your titles target a particular category of search intent, or whether your H1s reflect what the intent that you want this page to target. It's important that you prioritize the different intent categories, and you can use this by building simple if-else formulas that can be in Google Sheets or any other platform or tool. So here in the example on the screen, I have prioritized navigational intent because if the title contains the brand name, of course, without including the example of, the brand name being included as with a dash and at the end of each title. If you normalize the titles and then you see that your brand name is in it, then it's more likely that this page targets navigational intent. And even if it targets an additional type of intent, it's very unlikely that it's going to be, featured for another category of intent. So here it's the priority is navigational, and then high intent, and then informational intent, just to kind of keep it a little bit more simple. So it's very important as well to incorporate other metrics when you're doing this type of research. And you can see here that in the dashboard, we've incorporated things like search volume, keyword difficulty, cost per click, and other metrics that we have access to, because this is essentially something that you can use to help yourself prioritize depending on what strategy you're going to be using when you're building your pages later on. Now we are going to move a little bit to the topic of international keyword research and the caveats that you need to keep in mind when you're doing keyword research internationally. So first of all, it's important to note that all queries have a task language and a task location. So language, first of all, is very tricky for a number of reasons. For instance, some words in different languages can mean different things. And there are also a lot of semantic differences, even when doing the same language, which is expressed by the locale. So for instance, English in the UK is going to be English and it's not going to match the English used in America and things like that. There's also things like idioms, and there's also things like homonyms and homographs. And the definition of the latter two is that the words spelled the same and sounding the same but have different meanings are homonyms, and then the words that are spelled the same but sound different and have different meanings are homographs. So why am I even talking about this? Because it's very important to know that simply translating keywords is not enough, and it doesn't matter that Google Translate is getting a little bit more advanced, but it's not something that can replace a specialist's work or someone that is native in this language. And location is also another thing that is very important to keep in mind when you're doing keyword research internationally, because users in different locations expect different things when they are searching the same query. And the best example to explain this with is the English, so United States understanding for football and United Kingdom's understanding for football. It's a totally different thing. And another thing to keep in mind is that there are cultural differences that affect search. So I found a very interesting study that essentially gave some background and context about how the keyword news is searched for in different countries that primarily speak the Arabic language. So first of all, there are two spellings of the word, which are used with different frequency in different countries. There is also things like historical, kind of like history of colonization, which is influencing certain regions to have a population that perhaps is going to search for this keyword in French. And there are also things like current demographic or political situation, which for some countries means that they have a lot of expats, which might be searching for this keyword in English. So it's important to know that these type of cultural differences are going to change the search patterns for a particular keyword in this industry, in this country. So it's important to know the different aspects that are actually impacting the search volumes for the keywords that you're researching in this country. And another thing to note is that keywords and key terms rarely translate one-to-one, and not only in different countries, but also in the same country and even in the same language. So if we take an example of how the French search for the word chocolate, first of all, there are two different spellings of this term, which essentially vary in terms of their popularity in different regions. So that is definitely not something like the level of nuance of understanding of search patterns is not something that you can achieve by simply translating keywords. And again, explicit location does not mean the locale. And the difference here is that the locale, the language in which someone is searching might be English, but the location is different. So if they are, for instance, searching for hotels in Barcelona, but the person is based in Sofia, that that location expressed in the query is different than the location where the person is. So that is also something to keep in mind, specifically if you are operating a local brand and a local shop. And it's important to also know that a single keyword can have multiple different intents, and that is crucial, especially when your brand name is translated to another language and it matches the way that this word, if a word exists in that language that matches your brand name. And it also could mean different things, like the term Apple, for instance, could mean a computer company, a fruit, a person's name, and a city. And the same goes for Mercury. It can be an insurance company, it can be an engine company, it's a planet, it's a chemical element. So that is why classifying the intent of just a single keyword is quite difficult. And it's also a caveat there that it could also match the brand name, which could inflate unnaturally the search results that you're seeing. So what can you do? First of all, you need to use regex strategically. You should only translate keywords that you are absolutely certain that mean the same thing in the language that you're doing keyword research for. You can enhance the keywords with, you can enhance the filters with different keyword alternatives, variations, localized expressions, and different things in the language based on the research that you conduct. You also need to incorporate trends data and analytics data. It's very good to build a data source for your keyword research project. You can use Google Analytics to analyze user behavior and site interactions from the particular location that you're doing research for, if that is available to you. You can use Google Search Console to identify mismatches of search intent. And you can also use Google Trends to understand search behavior, not only in the country, but also in the specific regions of this country. And you can use Google Trends to, identify any discrepancies and variations between all the local languages that you have researched that are used within this location. And let's not forget, if you're not a localization SEO expert, just consult with one. Absolutely do that, because it is such a crucial step in the internalization strategy that it should not be undermined at all. You can do an amazing research, you can do a lot of work, but at the end of the day, you should consult with someone that is an expert in this language and also in the market that you are trying to target. And while we're on the topic of adapting for particular languages, it's also important to know that you need to adapt for particular industries as well. So intent is expressed very differently when it is observed from industry to industry. For instance, transactional intent can be in e-commerce expressed by terms like buy, price, purchase, expensive, recommendation, near me, coupon, and things like that. But in SaaS, the industry that I currently work predominantly in, it can be things like pricing, plans, software, API access, license, product key, trial, and things like that. And in the service industry, it could be things like call, book, reach, find, what we do, portfolio, demo, pricing. So it's very different. And that's where the importance of what I said previously about enhancing these filters with the keywords that you know are important for your industry. It is a very, very important step. So we must continue to adapt the filters, and we must continue to adapt the methods in which we do keyword research. But how do we do that? First of all, you need to find out what's unique about the industry. And I've split this down into different questions that you need to ask. First is, do people search for information differently? What are the key competitors in the industry? This will help you to create your navigational intent filters. Then, what characteristics are important for users? How are competitors evaluated? This will help you build the filters for intent that is commercial. And then what words do people and companies use to illustrate closing a deal? How does a purchase look like? This can help you build transactional intent filters. And finally, is local search important? If it is important, then you know that you should include the fifth category of localization as well. And what about search intent and content creation? In the dashboard, you can get an overview of the keyword cluster, which can help you prioritize where to focus your efforts first. And you can find the search intent keyword distribution for related keywords. So if you know that you want to target a particular topic and you know the main keywords of this topic, you can search for them and find out whether it's the variation is mostly leaning towards informational intent or is mostly leaning towards commercial intent. So if you are, for instance, assessed on bringing organic traffic to the website, you know that your target is going to be building more informational pages. But if you're assessed in things like demo trials or signups, then you know that higher intent keywords are going to get you there. And again, in the dashboard, you can search for keywords by type of SERP feature. And this, as Kyle previously explained, is very good at indicating the direction in which the patterns of search for this particular term are going as well. And it's important to know that you need to optimize the site's main pages based on the type of intent they serve. So you have resource pages serving informational intent, company pages are obviously for navigational intent, and product pages are transactional intent. And you can see different examples on the screen of what I mean by these three categories. But it's important to also include pages that specifically target things like commercial intent, which are white papers, case studies, and competitor comparisons, because these are, again, high intent pages that can help you complete, help complete the transactions on the website. So just key takeaways from this talk. Everyone is using search intent, and maybe you should consider incorporating it into your strategy too. There are three main types of intent, but many opportunities to niche down depending on the industry, the market, and understanding the intent and incorporating it into content creation can definitely help you not only build a better user experience, but it can also, when targeted and used strategically, help you close more sales via the website as well. There are different ways to classify intent, so choose the one that suits best your strategy, your budget, and your desire to have control over the methods that you are using or your ability to communicate with your stakeholders. And also, search intent can be applied to international keyword research and in different industries as well, but it's very important that you adapt to the specific niche in order to be successful at it. So I just want to say that the resources, specifically the dashboard, how to use the dashboard, and also a write-up of this talk are available in the slides. And I just want to say thank you for listening to my talk. It was very nice presenting to this audience again.